Hey y'all. Something I've heard over and over again coming from a lot of modern day doll collectors is how doll prices are supposedly out of control, how dolls have gotten increasingly more expensive over time, and how it has become so hard to keep up with new doll releases because of it. Looking back, there has been a precedent set for when toy companies hiked up prices in times of uncertainty, dwindling sales of flagship brands, and the big recession.
The company plans to raise prices and cut spending.
Dolls have gotten so expensive, prices have gone up, toy companies are pricing the general public out of collecting. Any variation of these three sentences have gotten commonplace among collector circles over the past year or two in the discourse of fashion dolls and their pricing. But have dolls really gotten more expensive? I'm a Virgo, so cold hard facts have more worth to me than someone's subjective feeling. That's why this video is going to be a deep dive into whether or not doll prices are at an all-time high in 2023, or whether this is actually not the case, truth be told. And no, I'm not a consumerist corporate apologist. Capitalism can go choke, and that's the truth. Prices are also one thing, of course. There's a matter of perceived and actual quality dolls have now compared to then, but that is a whole other kettle of fish. I hope to be able to open the eyes of a lot of people who might not be familiar with the history of doll pricing, how doll prices were 20 and 30 years ago, and how far today's dollar would stretch in the past compared to now. This video revolves around how much you would pay now for dolls of yesteryear if their prices would have been adjusted for inflation. Prepare for a whole lot of number crunching. Without further ado, let's dive right in. There are two main resources that I'm basing my research on. The first is Christmas.musetechnical.com, an amazing archive of Sears and JCPenney Christmas catalogs of the past 70 years that has practically all doll releases and what they would have retailed for back in the day. And the second is the Consumer Price Index Inflation Calculator, or the Bureau of Labor Statistics that I'm using to find out how much those dolls would cost you today. Of course, with those catalogs, the prices are mostly the general MSRP the dolls would have retailed for back then. So clearance prices and discount price dumping of certain dolls is not going to be taken into consideration. This is why I'm also taking the MSRP of current doll lines into account and not the clearance price after coupons, rebates, and vouchers. As the longest running fashion doll line on the market, it's easiest to take a look at Barbie first. I went back 30 years in time to the year 1992, as that year spawned a bunch of Barbie products that we have kind of like an equivalent to now, on doll shelves and toy aisles. That means I'm able to directly compare each price of that product with its current day counterpart. I've also decided against going back any further in time, as things like the oil crisis of the 70s and Reaganomics of the 80s would kind of prohibit me from making any comparison to modern day doll pricing. Let's take a look at the best-selling Barbie of all time first, Totally Hair Barbie, who came with an MSRP of $11.99. Adjusted for inflation, you would have to pay $25.08 now. In 2022, Mattel revamped Totally Hair Barbie as Barbie Totally Hair, who has a price tag of $22.99. You can see the new version of the doll costs $2 less, even though she basically only is half the quality. Like I had said in the intro, I'm not going to be dwelling on the level of quality we're getting in products now compared to then, though in some instances I have to make it clear that even though you might be paying more or even less than before, the use of materials, the design of dolls, and production techniques employed do have a hand in play here. Which leads me to the next Barbie. Next up, we have Teen Talk Barbie from 1992, who came with an MSRP of $24.99. You'd have to pay $52.27 now to get the doll. The equivalent to Teen Talk Barbie would be today's Breathe With Me Barbie doll, who has an MSRP of $24.99. So you basically only pay half the price here. Again, the design might be vastly different, but you can see the leaps and bounds we've made in the development of electronics employed in toys, because you only pay half the price, but that's because microchips as well as LED lights and the sound quality of speakers employed has gotten not only better, but the production of those has also gotten way cheaper than it was in 1992. Now let's move on to the classic Holiday Barbie of 1992, who had an MSRP of $37.99. Adjusted for inflation, you'd have to pay $79.46 to be able to get the doll. Fast forward to the year 2022, and the MSRP of the holiday Barbies we have gotten was $45. Now, the lack of quality that the holiday Barbies of last year had was a big talking point among collector circles. The unhemmed, laser-cut petals of the dress, the simplicity, the lack of jewelry, the lack of embellishments. Sure thing, you'd have to pay $79 to get the level of quality of the holiday Barbies of yesteryear. And seeing how doll pricing has become such a big talking point, it's easy to see that Mattel is scared of hiking up the price to $79 to deliver the level of quality that you would need to have for the holiday Barbie of 2022 be as good as the holiday Barbie of 1992. Just like the holiday Barbie, another annual Barbie product that's come out every year for the past couple of decades is the Barbie Dreamhouse. The Barbie Dreamhouse of 1992 had an MSRP of $169.99. That would be the equivalent to $355.55 now. The Barbie Dreamhouse that came out in 2022 had an MSRP of $224.99. Overall, the designs of each house is vastly different from one another. And you can see how cheap plastic has gotten that Barbie dream houses these days are huge, humongous even, and come with tons of stuff, yet are way cheaper than those that came out back in the day. Now for a last, very interesting Barbie doll pricing comparison, I want to quickly go to the year 1998, as that was the year Bob Mackey's beautifully iconic Fantasy Goddess of Asia collector doll came out, who came with a whopping price tag of $249.99. All dolls in the International Goddess line designed by Mackey cost that much. Compared to the collector level of quality we're getting now in Barbie dolls, I'd say sure thing she's truly worth that much. This was before I converted her pricing and saw that you would have to pay $452.69 now, as that is the equivalent to her original price. The most shocking part though, Mattel used to advertise collector dolls like the Fantasy Goddess of Asia as a keepsake that would rise in value over time. This is clearly not the case here, as there are tons of the doll new in box right in this very moment now on eBay, put up for only a fraction of what she was worth back in the day. Talk about dolly stock depreciation. Now that we're done taking a look at Barbie, let's move on over to an equally iconic long-running doll line that still has products out on shelves today, Bratz. Again, I'm going to be flip-flopping between product lines they put out back then and the equivalent to said product they have out now, and what their MSRP was worth compared to the retail price they have now. First up, the original Bratz Series 1 dolls released in 2001 that had an MSRP of $14.99. That amount would equal to $25.18 now. In 2021, MGA re-released the Bratz Series 1 as reproduction dolls with an MSRP of $24.99. In this instance, you basically have an identical doll line coming out 2 decades later with a pricing that is equal to the amount that you would have paid back then. The second wave of reproductions we have gotten were for the Rock Angels line that was released in 2005 with an MSRP of $17.99. That would equal to about $27.13 now. The reproductions that came out in 2021 had a price tag of $36.99 though. They came with less. I think they were lacking the CD that the original dolls came with. And I think we were all familiar with the fact that the reproductions were lacking in terms of faithfully giving us the same quality of dolls that came out in 2005. There might be various reasons why there was a price hike. Among them probably that the reproductions were produced in less volumes. Therefore, having less batches of dolls to produce means that each doll that was produced ended up being more expensive in production than the ones back then. Now, I was sadly not able to find out what the Girls' Night Out as well as Pretty and Punk dolls would cost you back when they were originally released, but I was able to find the MSRPs for the more luxe Bratz releases like Formal Funk in 2003 that cost you $34.99, as well as Forever Diamonds in 2006 with the same MSRP. Both lines would equal to about $56.35 or $51.46 now. Whereas the Girls' Night as well as Pretty and Punk reproductions retail for $36.99 and $34.99 now. I specifically picked up the Pretty and Punk reproductions MSRP price to compare to the pricing Bratz dolls had back then, because there was quite a bit of controversy going on about how it's supposedly overpriced, which clearly is not the case. And for a final Bratz comparison, I've picked out the Bratz pad that was released in 2004, retailing at $199.99, equal to about $311.91 now. Now, while there's no Bratz pad reproduction going on, I picked out the Rainbow High dorm. While I'm not the biggest fan of the design of the Rainbow High dorm, it's very grayish. It being massive and made out of wood, costing you about $199.99, shows up the plastic Bratz pad when it comes to quality in terms of materials used, even though the Bratz pad looks so much cooler. But then again, you would have to pay over $100 more for it. And at the end of the day, it's just a hunk of plastic. Now, as we've taken a look at a variety of doll prices from major players over the years, we can say that doll prices have mostly stayed the same and in most instances have actually gone down quite a bit, especially when taking the collector level of quality they're delivering in the Playland sphere into consideration. However, in some cases, Mattel, the dollar doesn't stretch as far as it used to, and you're only getting half the quality for the same pricing, which is probably the root of the problem here, making people believe dolls have gotten more expensive when they haven't. I feel like older collectors are more lenient towards doll pricing because they still remember an era where they had to pay $30 and practically got nothing in return for it. So how did the idea that doll pricing has shot up these past 2 years become such a common misconception? I believe it's twofold. On the one hand, we see a distortion of supply and demand as resellers have screwed over the consumer these past 2 years, while big companies in question laughed all the way to the bank. But that doesn't really affect pricing per se. I think the main issue at hand here is how fashion doll collecting transformed as a whole. The early 2000s ushered in a new era for dolls. Inspired by fast fashion brands like Zara, products were pushed out at a significantly higher rate than before. Development cycles were shortened, product launches happened way more frequently, and companies really honed in on the gotta catch 'em all mentality of people. And this completionist way of thinking, paired with big-time FOMO fans were developing thanks to social media, has made people think that it's not enough to buy one doll and accompanying fashions. They need to buy a whole line of dolls, and playsets, and merchandise, and apparel, and media, etc., etc. So the feeling that the hobby became pricier and pricier isn't because of the price itself, but because of the masses and variety of product that was pumped out at a lightning speed rate. MGA, in their attempt to push Barbie out of toy aisles, kickstarted this back when Bratz became a phenomenon, and Mattel did the same during Monster High's heyday. Now, with the OMGs, as well as Rainbow High and Shadow High versus Monster High, we see history repeat itself. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you did, please leave a like, comment down below and let me know what you think of how doll prices have developed over the past couple of years. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already, and I might be seeing you in my next video. Bye for now.